Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, too powerful for Marvel movies, Monica Rambeau. All right, she is powerful. Like, she's powerful. And it's kind of crazy. Okay, so wind the clock back to Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16, which I think was released in 1987. And the idea was that Monica Rambeau was basically introduced as the new Captain Marvel. For those guys who don't know, and this is one of the things that for non-comic book readers, the mantle of Captain Marvel can get a little bit hairy. But originally you had Mar-vell, right? Like this Kree soldier from the Kree planet of Hala, who was basically showing up on Earth to see whether or not Earth could be conquered. And then ultimately he turncoated and then turned against, you know, the Kree Empire, which led to like his battle with Yon-Rogg and all that kind of cool stuff. Anyway, the idea behind this was that eventually Mar-vell died in 1984, the death of Captain Mar-vell. And what happened was Marvel had the mantle of Captain Marvel sitting open. And so what they did is they said, okay, we're going to create Monica Rambeau. She's going to be the newest Captain Marvel. Now, around that time, you did have Carol Danvers, but Carol Danvers was known as Miss Marvel. She wasn't actually Captain Marvel. And so because of that, like the mantle and everything was sort of maintained. And so following that, you eventually had the introduction of Vell, who became the new Captain Marvel. And then you had Vell, who became the new Captain Marvel. And then finally, like Carol Danvers becomes Captain Marvel. So there were a lot of people who had the mantle before like Carol Danvers did. But nonetheless, so in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16, you end up having Monica Rambeau, who's introduced, and she's got these powers calling herself Mar-vell. And what ends up happening is later on down the line in the story, you end up finding out that she was basically hit up by this guy who had developed this kind of technology, or at least was working alongside this scientist who worked for a dictator. Now, Andre Leclerc was the scientist that originally hit up Monica Rambeau, and then he basically tells her the story about a guy named Philippe Picaro. And Philippe Picaro is basically a scientist working for a dictator, and Philippe is essentially, well, really he's working for Roxxon Oil, but Philippe is basically trying to find a way to like tap into other universes and harness their energy. And so ultimately, like Monica goes underground, or she goes kind of undercover, because she's basically a cop at the time. She goes undercover, she ends up basically, you know, getting the attention of Philippe, and then becomes the subject of his experiment. And what he does is he basically bombards her with all these energies from like other realities to see whether or not it can work. And what this does is it basically transitions her body and turns her into a state of pure energy. Now, one of the funny things about Monica, and this is kind of the crazy thing, is technically she can manipulate every form of energy that exists out there, but she's almost kind of like Nightcrawler in that regard, right? Like those of you guys who don't know, Nightcrawler, when he teleports to a different dimension and then to where he wants to go, right? So like it's called the Brimstone dimension. So if Nightcrawler was sitting in Los Angeles and wanted to go to Washington, DC, he would teleport to the Brimstone dimension and then to Washington, DC. That's why like in the comics, he comes out smelling like brimstone, and while there always kinds of seems to be like this sort of flame surrounding him, or like this kind of fiery substance that surrounds him. But what ended up happening with Monica is it's actually her mind that teleports. And so what happens is that because she can access all these different forms of energy, electromagnetic, ultraviolet, gamma rays, what essentially happens here is her mind goes to this other dimension and basically controls the energy from that dimension in her physical body. So it's almost like she's playing a puppet master for herself. Now, what this does is it makes Monica Rambeau one of the most powerful characters in Marvel. Now, I say that within reason, right? Like Monica Rambeau is not a reality warper, but one of the best things about Monica is because she can start shifting through different forms of energy, she has all the powers and the principles of those energies. So like being able to turn into a light wave, she can literally travel at the speed of light. Like it's crazy when it comes to those kinds of powers. There was a moment in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16 when she was able to like literally blast Peter Parker with a blast of energy. And it seemed kind of crazy because like his spider sense goes off, but she reacts faster than he can. And like she's done that in a multitude of instances, right? Like there was one point where it was one of the old Avengers stories, I don't remember which one, but there was one point where she flies into space and she fixes all these satellites and then flies back to Earth before the Avengers can take a breath. Like there was one point where she fought Magneto and she was able to like become electromagnetic energy and fly through Magneto's shield. So like literally for the most part, almost any form of energy that anybody uses, at least if it's like a concussive form of energy, which is to say an energy that's physical that they shoot at somebody else, then like Monica can learn to control it. The only thing that I would say would be kind of a quagmire and a bit of a question here would be somebody like Cyclops, right? Because for Havoc, it's basically solar energy more or less. And like because of the fact that it's basically light energy, she can in turn control it and use it for her own ends. But Cyclops shoots energy out of his optic beams that comes from a different dimension. And it's a dimension that like Monica's not from, that she's not familiar with. And so if her and Cyclops met and Cyclops shot her with an optic beam, I would say like in the first skirmish, he would probably be able to injure her, or she'd have to turn into a form of energy whereby it like passes through her, right? So she's basically immalleable. But like at the same time, if she learns to understand how his energy works, then she can in turn control it. And so if she's surrounded by all the X-Men and Cyclops shoots off his optic beams, she would in turn be able to like control and split the beams, and they would hit all the other X-Men and take them out. That's one of the crazy things, is like being able to manipulate energy like that. She was able to sneak aboard the X-Men's Blackbird without being seen or heard. She can make herself invisible. She can camouflage herself to look like her surroundings. She can bend light around herself to look like other people. It's crazy with the level of power she possesses. Like she's kind of a Swiss Army knife. But again, that's one of the crazy things, is because if you go and you read Al Ewing's Ultimates, where she's talking to Adam Brashear, or at least Adam Brashear starts to analyze her powers, one of the things he says is like there's really no limit to what her powers are. And that's one of the big caveats to her, is because with her being a member of the Avengers, and because the Avengers usually fought Earth-based threats, which is to say characters who were like really powerful in their own right, but they weren't like cosmic threats. Because that doesn't really happen, you don't really see Monica Rambeau facing off against people who can like manipulate all forms of energy or something along those lines. But at the same time, you'd have to believe it was a stalemate, because if you have someone like Owen Reese, for example, who can manipulate the molecular structure of matter, and then he goes to face off against like Monica Rambeau, then on some level it could be a stalemate depending on how far it gets pushed. Now, in reality, he could just like turn her into a teacup, right? But like you're talking about her being able to manipulate almost every form of energy that exists. And so if it's in the universe, it's an energy she recognizes, which means that like everything Molecule Man could do, she could in some form like set it back. But we've never seen her do that, right? Like we've never seen her face off against someone who turned the Baxter Building of the Fantastic Four or like the Empire State Building into like a giant statue, and then she shifted it back. But if she can control all these forms of energy, then she has to be able to control like the molecular form of that energy if she can use it to her own end. And if she can, then that in turn would make her like a manipulator of that form of energy. Everything is composed of energy. Being able to manipulate all those forms of energy make her insanely capable, like make her insanely powerful. I don't really know how else to say that, especially when you apply her to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because the power of Carol Danvers in the MCU is still not really readily explained, right? Like we don't know the basis behind it. I mean, we know it's like the result of an explosion, but like we don't really know like how all it works. When you're looking at Carol, you say, okay, it's like she basically becomes binary, which we knew from the trailers. And so like she essentially like emits energy. If that's an energy source that Monica recognizes, Carol Danvers is defeated, because Monica will just turn her energy against her, is all that'll happen. There was one point where she fought a villain who could use antimatter, and then in turn like he put an antimatter field around himself, and so Monica Rambeau just suffocated him inside of his own force field because she couldn't get into it. It's small little things like that. Like it's small little strange abilities like that. And that's what kind of makes her so cool. Plus being astronomically fast. And so if you take Monica Rambeau and you throw her into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she would crush everybody, including Thanos. Like nobody would have a chance. Just right off the bat, you're talking about like being able to move at light speed, and then being able to have like strength on par with being able to face off against like She-Hulk. I'd bet all the money in my pockets to all the money in your pockets that while She-Hulk wouldn't necessarily be able to like hold her own against Thanos, she'd be able to do a little bit better than fair. And so you're talking about like somebody who is at least on par with She-Hulk's power, if not a little bit stronger, of course weaker than the Incredible Hulk, but then couple that with being able to move at like light speed. And so you're talking about like a battle of attrition. By the time Thanos landed one or two hits on Monica, she would have landed thousands. And so like the fight would be over before it even started. But like you take a character like that and then you have her face off against Iron Man. Well, Iron Man uses electricity, so she just becomes electricity and shuts down his suit or blows his suit up with him in it. With Thor, I mean, he has magic, but magic, while it is kind of a source of energy in and of itself, it's not directly. And I've never really seen Monica be able to like control the magical abilities of another person. All magic does in Marvel Comics is let you tap into something else, right? So like the ability to quote unquote manipulate magic is like using a hammer or using like a shovel or something like that. It's a means to achieve an end. It's learning spells to achieve goals by manipulating other things. So like Doctor Strange, his enchantments don't really do anything. His enchantments let him tap into the power of others, which in turn allows him to open a wormhole, if that makes any sense, and like travel through space. But like when you're talking about that, like you're talking about Monica Rambeau facing off against someone like Thor, I don't know if she'd really be able to beat him. I mean, she'd have to turn into a form of energy, but again, like being able to move faster than light would probably make that work. With the Incredible Hulk and gamma radiation, because she can manipulate that, she would just draw all the gamma radiation out of the Incredible Hulk. That would be the end of that. Captain America, I mean, he would be readily defeated. Black Widow, Hawkeye, easily defeated. I mean, she's done things like catch bullets because she's so fast. She's a powerhouse. And it's one of the funny things because by and large, unless you're a comic book reader, Monica Rambeau is obscure to you. And unless you read the old Avengers stories or Next Wave, she was probably obscure to you. The only way you would really know who Monica Rambeau is if either you go through and like you read the old comics, you track the history of the Captain Marvel where she was Captain Marvel, then she became Photon, and then she became Pulsar, I think it was, or if you read like Al Ewing's Ultimates. Other than that, like she's really one of the more obscure characters out there, and it's one of those scenarios where she was just never really effectively written. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she would single-handedly crush everybody. She'd be like a goddess. It'd be absolutely bonkers. It's really a crapshoot because we've never seen anybody like her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you don't really see her fight the kind of characters you would expect her to see to really like showcase her various powers. Like it's kind of one of the downsides, like having her face off against someone who can manipulate reality and basically manipulate energy in the extreme, and then see how she fares against that person. We've never really seen. I would love to see that. But you throw her into the MCU and she's gonna crush everybody. Like not even in hell would you see a massacre like what you would see if Monica Rambeau showed up in the MCU. Anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.